From Man of Steel to Wonder Woman, all roads have led to this the long-fabled Snyder Cut of the Justice League. On this episode, we are talking about Zack Snyder's 4-hour version of Justice League, and our discussion was so big that we had to break it up into 2 episodes, and this is part 1. Hurry to your mother boxes because the show starts right now, and it is filled with spoilers. We have been through so much on this journey to Snyder Cut, both in our last few episodes and our Patreon exclusive episode that Celeste and I did for a Justice League film commentary, or as our friends over at You Have to Watch This podcast say, Justice League. And we're finally here after 4 long years. We are talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I could not think of a better crew to join me on this adventure. Please help me in welcoming from the Nerf Herders Assemble co-host and author and Victims staff writer, Mr. Joshua Howell.
What's up? Thanks for having me. Can't wait to talk about this. I've been on no podcast yet since I watched this. Not even Nerf Herders. I think we're going to talk about it next week. So I'm excited to talk with you guys about this for sure.
We get the exclusive. I'm about it. And he is currently one half of the Feelin' Film podcast and also a valuable voice here at Victims and Villains, Mr. Coles Black Nerd Magic Davis.
Hey, man, it's been a journey. We Suicide Squad Justice League, we had to go through hell to get to heaven, and I can say that heaven was worth it.
And the last man on this journey with us is Dan, the movie man Rockwood, one of the senior voices here at Victims and Villains.
You honor me, Josh. Thank you. This has been a long time coming, I feel like. So I feel very honored to be part of this conversation because I know, Josh, you in particular have been eagerly awaiting a Snyder Cut before it was even confirmed that we were getting one. So this has been a wild ride to be on for a long time.
I had alerts set up on my phone for when there was a news story that broke about, like, Zack Snyder or the Snyder Cut or Justice League, and I was on my way to go get groceries, and I pulled over on the side of the road to call friends and be like, it's official, it's really happening, like, this is the day, like, my wife and I are planning a potluck watch party next week, so, like, and I think everyone on this call, I have seen this movie more than anyone on here. We're recording Sunday, and I've seen it 3 times already. I've spent 12 hours with these heroes. I'm so stoked to talk about this.
Wow. Dedication.
Yeah, I've only seen it twice. You got it.
Well, let's go ahead and get into some spoiler-free thoughts real quick. And Josh, what are you thinking coming out of this movie?
Well, hey, I know this is an audio podcast, so you can't see the Snyder Cut associate producer hoodie I got on, but this is something I've been waiting for and begging for in a respectful manner since 2017. I was honestly a fan of the previous films, the Man of Steel and BVS Ultimate Edition. I've been a huge Zack Snyder fan. I think he's a very, very talented individual, and I was just heartbroken that it seemed like a studio took advantage of a tragedy in his life to force a different direction when they could have gone about it more tactfully and in a better way. But the day has finally come, and I saw it once with myself, and then I watched it again with the wife last night, and it was everything I wanted, man. It's bittersweet because it obviously sets up things in the future, but as far as the experience itself, I couldn't have asked for more. I'm finally happy to see what Jason-Momoa has been hyping for years, unapologetically on every social media platform he's been on.
Well, for me, I've always been a fan of Zack Snyder. Like, Dawn of the Dead, I think it's honestly one of the best horror remakes ever made. And it took me a while to get warmed up to him as far as his work with the DCEU. Like, at first, I was not a big fan of Man of Steel, and I was not a big fan of BVS, but that all changed when I gave those films a rewatch, and then I was able to get into the Ultimate Edition of BVS, and I had a newfound appreciation for his style and the way that he was handling these heroes. So when I saw that Justice League came out in 2017, because I was there opening night, me and my girlfriend were there, we were very disappointed. And for me, it kind of looked at me like giving a stain on Snyder's name, but I was not aware of all the behind the scenes problems and all the issues that were happening behind the scenes and how his vision was kind of taken away from him, and the studio wanted him to condense this down to 2.5 hours. But as we can see now with the Snyder Cut, you need the full 4 hours to really understand the journey of these heroes coming against Steppenwolf and Darkseid. There was so much left on the cutting room floor, so much that I saw in the trailers that I didn't see in the Whedon cut. And looking back now on the Whedon cut, it's a disgrace. It really is a disgrace. Like, not more of a disgrace than what I think Suicide Squad was, but I can't go back to the original Justice League after watching this film. I mean, I love this film, and I think honestly it's one of the best comic book experiences we have had so far in this new decade. And I think it is the number one film for me in the DCEU because it is able to give each of these heroes their own moments. We're able to understand their drive. We're able to understand their journey. We're able to understand the problems and the issues that they're going through and how they're able to come together as a group and take on, dark forces who are trying to change the world. And it reminded me a lot about the Avengers, but I don't like to do DC and Marvel comparisons, but I think if there was anything close to anything we saw in the later Avengers films, this will be it. And it pains me to see this movie and to see so much material that can be used for sequels, that can be used for future films. And we don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen with that. I hope that the success of this film, which looks like it's getting a lot of success, is getting a lot of good critic reviews, and a lot of people are watching it. I'm hoping that it leads to Zack Snyder getting a chance to make a trilogy out of this that he promised to do. He has the legs to do it. He has the vision. I mean, and he's willing to do it. He has the passion for it. We can see the passion that he has for these heroes within this film, and I hope he gets a chance to do that. But overall, love this film. I mean, I watched it a week ago through a screen, and I watched it again to get ready for this podcast, and it's honestly the best 4 hours you could spend right now. Outside of maybe The Irishman on Netflix that I know about, but yes, this is a awesome, great film.
We're going to also talk about the future that this movie sets up and our hopes for, the larger universe, the Snyderverse, as now it's being hashtagged Restore the Snyderverse. But Dan, what did you think about this movie?
Man, I loved it, and just kind of almost as a juxtaposition, if I can speak now, to what Celeste said. We are seeing some really good reviews and reactions to this film. At the same time, I'm seeing just a lot of negative feedback out there about it from film critics and other people who have checked it out. Which all I have to say to that is, one, did we even watch the same movie? And two, I enjoyed it, and in fairness, I really liked the original Justice League. I thought that movie was a lot of fun and had some really great story moments and did a decent job of introducing us to some of those new characters. And this director's cut, this full edition, just does such a good job of taking its time. And Josh, I know you and I have talked about director's cuts in the past and if they're needed and what they add, particularly when we did the Dr. Sleep episode. We did the director's cut of that, and though that adds a lot of really good story to that film, I don't think it is necessary if you want to watch it to necessarily seek out the director's cut. I'd say the theatrical edition is fine. For this film specifically, it's a completely different movie. I mean, it completely changes so much, and you get those character backstories that you're missing. So, yeah, I would say, I mean, if you have the 4 hours to spare, if you're going to watch Justice League, especially if you haven't seen it yet, you got to go with the Snyder Cut. I don't see any reality in which the theatrical edition would be appropriate now that we have this full story that Zack Snyder wanted to tell out there in the universe. There
is no reason, unless you want to go to what Celeste said and just disgrace your eyeballs, then go for it. I obviously, having seen this movie 3 times now before we even record it, before it's even hit a week of a release, I loved this movie. This has been a movie that I have been anticipating since I walked out of the theater the first time seeing Justice League. And like Dan, like I have a lot of moments that I really love about the Joss Whedon version, and like I'll always have like scenes that I can probably revisit, but when you compare it to what Snyder did with this movie, I read a review this morning that was talking about like how, you know, the genre of comic book movies have these expectations and almost this formula, and Snyder pushes back against that and creates something that truly stands out. I mean, whether you're talking about from a visual standpoint, like Josh, when I did BVS with you and Seth last week, you know, one of the things that's so distinct about that film is the cinematography, and likewise, you get the cinematography here as well. But like Dan said, like you really get these character introductions that really flesh out. And I think for me, we can jump back into this later. The best part about this movie is not just being able to see the heroes come together, but it's also giving Steppenwolf the much needed redemption that he needed. We talked about this in our commentary, which you guys can find on Patreon. But the character design for Steppenwolf looks like someone just stretched out a dildo and put armor on it. And here, he looks legitimately terrifying, but yet at the same time, you have these asides with Desaad and Apocalypse and Darkseid, where you find out that he's a sympathetic character looking for revenge. Or redemption, sorry. And I think that was kind of the thing that made me really like his character so much more. I think that he was given so much better use in this film than he wasn't in the original one. But let's jump into the heroes before we get into the villains. First hero we meet in this movie is Aquaman. And Aquaman, this film feels more cohesive with James Wan's movie than it did when we originally saw it back in 2017, because the version that we get here, you have a lot of that. You have that, like a lot of that, like unsureness and like searching and kind of like having purpose that he would eventually end up getting towards like the second and third act of the Aquaman movie. And I think Momoa is one of the just critical assets here that make this movie so memorable, because it's such a completely different take on the character of Arthur Curry.
Yeah, I know for me, in the beginning of this film, we see that Arthur still has a beef with Atlantis. He still has that resentment that he feels that his mother abandoned him, and that he feels that the people of Atlantis didn't want him. You know, it's only until we see James Wan's Aquaman that all that gets cleared up, and he really understands the reason why his mother had to do that. But we can still see that this is a man still trying to find an identity for himself. I mean, he goes around, he's helping regular people. Like there's a scene in this film where he's helping a couple of crew members get out of a terrible windstorm, and he warned them. He told them, like, hey, you need to check out for these storms later on. And he's helping just regular people try to live. And you know, Batman comes to him, and at first he's not really down with joining the Justice League. You know, it's pretty much all of these heroes, we find them really on their own. We understand that they are excellent, that they're capable of doing great things on their own, but it's really the team mindset that really brings them together and helps bring out the best traits of their character. Towards the end of the film, we see that Aquaman, I think, I can't remember which character was talking to him, but he talks about how, well, Cyborg just lost his father, and we're going to task him with going up against the most powerful people in the universe. And then somebody's like, well, I thought you didn't care. And then Aquaman's like, no, I I never said that I didn't care. Like, he really does have a hero's journey throughout this film, and more of that carries on to his own singular film. But we get to see Aquaman as more than just being this rad guy who's a part of the water and who feels like almost like a California surfer, which is what I felt like he was in the Whedon cut of Justice League. But I feel like in this film, he has a more serious, eternal and kind of redemption about himself. And he understands what he uses his power for. And I think the journey in this film helps him to become more comfortable with being a part of Atlantis and actually going back home in the James Wan single film.
I think people take him more seriously as well. I mean, just the subtle dialogue changes with his first meeting with Bruce in that town just made it show, that Bruce was taking this a little more seriously. He was putting a little more respect on his name and his presence than, oh, I heard you talk to fish and stuff like that. It was less about jokes and more about I've taken the time to freaking, climb over mountains to come see you, and it's important. And yet he already knew that he was, he already knew that Arthur Curry was in the room, but he was respecting the town. He was respecting Arthur Curry. He didn't know if Arthur was, if Arthur was there secretly, or if the whole town knew. Like, there was just so much more respect about that first scene, and then that just continued throughout the film. There was no, sitting on the lasso of truth, having a an emotional breakdown moment. Instead, there was the scene that Cal's just mentioned where he was talking to the Flash, and it was subtle and it was short, but it showed that he does care, and he does have emotion to him. He's not just a drunk, brooding surfer dude. But at the same time, they didn't get rid of other things that I was glad to see, that it was Snyder's stuff, not Joss's stuff. Like, surfing the dude down from the sky and through a building. He still had plenty of great stuff in there. But I felt that I didn't feel like it was a completely different character. I just felt that they refined the focus around him, gave him a little more respect and a little more depth to him.
We talked about this in our BVS episode too, the way that Snyder has this way of every film that he is doing, he's telling the singular story, but he's also building the world around that story at the same time. And one of the things that I think I really appreciated more about his character in particular was the way that when Bruce and Diana are sitting in the cave and they're going over the Luthor's files, and she's like, oh, well, he's Atlantean, we can't trust him. And so you're not only getting the, that hesitation from Diana, but there's reasons behind it. Like, we actually get to see the hostility between, not only because of, Arthur and Volko's relationship dynamics as well, you get to see the relationship between Arthur to the Atlanteans, but also you have these asides with Diana and Arthur, where you also get to understand the long hostile history between the Amazons and the Atlanteans, and kind of how they have to work together in order to put their differences aside to accomplish something for the greater good. And just being able to kind of see Diana really come around to Arthur as well, I think was really rewarding, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that, in a lot of the negative reviews I've been seeing, I've seen things about critics being like, oh, there's too much world building in this, or there's too much setting up for future content, whether it's like with exchanges like that, or just talking about what could come, or world building out beyond this movie with more stuff about Atlantis and stuff like that. I feel like those people put that on Zack's shoulders, as if that wasn't the film he was told to do, because people act like Zack just went out and made a 4-hour movie on a whim, and this wasn't all pre-approved by the WB. Sure, they ended up changing their mind, but they tasked him with this, and this was the WB who wanted to catch up with the MCU, and fast-tracked everything. But, first of all, Zack, while he was probably influential with the story, he's not credited for the screenplay of this film. And two, he didn't film a 4-hour movie by himself. That was pre-approved, and then the WB made changes and decided to nix that. But, putting all of that on Zack's shoulders, basically doing what the studio wanted him to do, I think is unfair. And then on the other half of that, with people saying, well, this is just the same movie, just longer. I mean, it's clearly not. And while the story beats are there, imagine if, DC had paid Jim Lee to do a 4-part comic book series, and Jim Lee did all 4 parts. But then before they released it, they had some dude that can only do stick drawings do issue number 3, and they just nixed all of Jim Lee's stuff and had, some, 5-year-old that does stick figures do that whole thing. It would destroy that third comic and that whole series as a whole. And that's what I feel that the Justice League was. I mean, Whedon has his things, but when I saw that film, I felt like it was a hodgepodge of cinematography, and I could see it on the screen, the differences between Snyder's cinematography and Whedon's. And to see this film with it all one track of mind, one visual style, it changes the experience. And that's why, for me, it's a different film, because it's got more story and everything, yes, but I wasn't being pulled out with these horrible changes in style every 10 minutes because Joss or WB just wanted to, change everything on the screen for no reason.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. We should just call the Justice League version the CGI mustache tragedy.
Yeah, but it's more than that. I mean, even scenes that for the most part were kept in, like for example, the scene with Superman in the cornfield. It's pretty much the same scene. The dialogue might be slightly changed, but it's pretty much the same scene. Mm-hmm. Why they felt that, they needed Joss's fingerprints on everything, it was just weird. And I remember that scene from the trailers looking great. And then in the 2017, it was just weirdly like a blurred background and his face was all messed up. And I mean, it was just like, even now seeing the original Snyder cut, they could have kept that scene in the Joss Whedon and it wouldn't have changed anything. It felt like, some of the things that they changed were just changed for change's sake, not because it made the film shorter or better or changed the narrative for the Joss Whedon. just seemed vindictive at times, some of the choices that they made, not really because it, made for a shorter film.
It very much suffered from George Lucas syndrome a lot of the time with that Whedon cut, and just feeling those changes not really adding anything to the story and just being more arbitrary than anything else. I did feel, looking at this, we were discussing Aquaman earlier and kind of his introduction with the film. I like how the Snyder Cut opted to not include subtitles. Did you guys notice that when they were speaking in that native language? Mm-hmm. And so, like Aquaman cracks a joke about, I'm sure he'll give me the money anyways. But you as the audience now, you're not seeing that. And it's all to set up, I feel, to find that, Bruce Wayne can understand them, knows what they're talking about. And that wasn't included in the Whedon cut. That was different. So I feel like this film does a better job of showing Bruce Wayne how resourceful and educated he is, more than just being a rich guy that's bankrolling the whole operation.
Bruce, too, he's kind of like the source of like everything that is like reset by the end of the film. He's the one that buys Martha's house back because he, jokes and says, I bought the bank. But it's also implied that he's also the one that gets buried the crime lab job as well at the end of the movie. Very resourceful.
I don't think I even picked up on that. I didn't realize that was related. Maybe I was in a coma from watching a movie for over 3.5 hours at that point.
Well, it was Star Labs, wasn't it? Or was it a crime lab?
No, it was a crime lab.
It was a crime lab.
Yeah.
That's right. I was thinking of the other Star Labs guy. Yeah, it could have easily. Although I'm sure it would have benefited him even more if Bruce paid for a great attorney to relook at Barry's dad's case. I think I would have preferred that than a job.
That's not the Barry Allen story, though.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we could get into the moral ambiguity of Bruce Wayne and what he does and doesn't do with his money that could actually help Gotham City and other people. It reminds me of, in the MCU, Thanos wanting to obtain all the Infinity Stones and wipe out half the population so that there are more resources. Yet he could just make more resources. He could have done that. He could have solved the problem forever. Instead, all he did was, in a set amount of time, populations are going to rebound and we're going to be in the same place all over again. But yeah, it's the funny thing about this Justice League. First of all, I feel like the way the DC universe was handled, it was mishandled in a lot of ways. And the thing that I still wish had happened was if they took their time. It really felt like they were rushing into this to try and be competitive with the MCU. But we should have gotten a Wonder Woman movie and an Aquaman movie and a Flash movie and then brought everyone together for the Justice League. I think having your team-up movie be where you're introducing several characters at once, that doesn't allow you to take as much time with them. And the Snyder Cut definitely addresses some of that. It's made me care about Cyborg way more than I ever have in any iteration that I've seen of him. But you're still missing something by not paying attention to those smaller stories before you get to this big team-up moment.
Yeah. I would say that the downfall of what the previous regimen who was responsible for DC was just not having focus. There was a time where during the mid of last decade where the MCU was starting to build up. It was starting to get, the big box office numbers, the critical reception. Everybody was on Team Marvel. And so then DC was wondering of how to take that steam away. But instead, I think what they should have did is that they should have just focused on telling the best story they could with these characters. What serves the benefit of trying to compete with Marvel at their own game? Marvel have found their formula. They found their way of how to tell their stories. They found the way of how to build up their universe. DC, there's nothing wrong with what the tone of the DC films were. There was nothing wrong with DC being a more darker view of what these superheroes are. Not everything has to be like lighthearted MCU stuff. There's a place for that. We have Shazam, which I feel Shazam is close to an MCU film, but I feel like it does a great job of what DC already does. And then we had Aquaman as well. I just feel that when it came to having Justice League, it felt like that we should have got a couple more solo films before we made it over to Justice League. I saw it apparently in the original version, just how rushed it was. You know, there were so many scenes left on the cutting room floor. There was so much not being told about these characters. I mean, we already know what happened with the Ray Fisher controversy. He came out and said, I filmed so many scenes for Cyborg. Like, this guy was supposed to be important to the story, and it turned out that he was just a minuscule part of what the theatrical version was. And there comes a time where, you know, it doesn't serve you any good to have your plate of food and then look at what somebody else is eating, then wanting what they want to eat. Like, no, worry about your plate of food. You know, worry about how to make this food the best it can be. And the audience and the critics were responding kind with that. You know, I respect a person that has a vision. Like, many people could say what Snyder's vision is and not like his style, but you have to admit, the man knows what he's doing and he has a plan for what to do with this world and with these characters. And that's admirable. You know, it's better than, you know, Snyder just taking whatever the MCU was doing and just putting that into his film. Like, no, he had a plan, and the studio just got very nervous because they were looking at what Marvel was doing and not focused on doing what they needed to do to be the best they could be.
I was on mute, my bad. I will defend the formula of the DC films, the arrangement of them, because I look at them from a slightly different way. So first of all, when Iron Man was first announced, that came out the same. The MCU announced that the first movie they're going to do is going to be Iron Man, and that came out after Batman Begins. So I'll say all day that the MCU saw what DC and Nolan did with the comic book hero, saw them take it seriously, and saw how people reacted to it and said, you know what, we could do that. So they announced that year that they are going to start working on Iron Man. So then Iron Man came out the same year as The Dark Knight Rises. And I'm sure that the WB was pressuring Nolan to be like, how can we turn this into a universe? And Nolan was like, nah, bro, I'm going to do my thing. When I'm done, then you can do your own universe thing. So then, you know, a couple years later, Nolan finished his franchise. The MCU has already started off. They've got their first couple movies, and then we got Man of Steel. What I appreciated was, had we kept this going past Justice League, what happened before Justice League gave you enough of the Trinity, you know, the main three. We had a Superman film. We had Batman v Superman. I didn't think we needed just like Spider-Man showed up in Age of Ultron before he had his own movie. We had already had so many versions of Spider-Man on the screen. We knew enough about him, even if it wasn't with this actor. And Batman the same. We had Batman through the 90s, and then we just had the Nolan trilogy. I didn't feel like we needed a solo film for Batman before the Justice League. And then you had a Wonder Woman film, and then you had Justice League. And then afterwards, you had Aquaman. You had plans for a Flash movie. For, you know, those are still part of the Justice League, but they're not the Trinity. And let's face it, Justice League wasn't like prime Justice League. It was like the beginnings of it. And if they continued going on this storyline, Steppenwolf would have been like their first encounter. Then they'd have their own individual movies to step up their game to face the major villain Darkseid when he came down. Then that would be like true Justice League prime story. But I mean, I thought that it was fine the way they went with it. In terms of not doing the same formula as the MCU, the story narratives went a different way, and the arrangement of the films went a different way. But, you know, if they didn't like what Snyder was doing, they should have just let him finish Justice League, and then they should have cut ties. It's not like the MCU didn't have any shit films in their first, couple phases. They had plenty of bumps along the road. Then they changed. They went through how many Hulk actors, they did 2 Thor films before they found, what people really adhered to with Thor Ragnarok. They've made changes along the road instead of just stopping and halting everything and making a big drama about it. They just made strategic choices. And I think DC, WB, if they really didn't like Snyder, they could have let him finish his Justice League and then taken the universe in another direction and moved on instead of all this drama and mess.
You also have to keep in mind that when they originally announced this, like, this was like a full-fledged, like, hey, we're going all in to the level and the degree that Marvel's going in. Like, yes, you're going to get a Justice League movie, you're going to get a Flash movie, a Cyborg movie, you're going to get a Green Lantern movie, and it's not just going to be Hal Jordan, it's going to be the Corpse. It's going to be a dark sci-fi epic that is going to blow your mind, and then you're going to get Justice League 2. And I think I'm going to side with Josh on this. I think that, you know, DC has done a really great job at setting this up, but they've always been so hesitant. I remember that BVS and the next quote-unquote universe movie relied solely on the box office performance of the first weekend of Man of Steel. They're like, we're not going to announce anything, like, nothing's official, and then they announced it at San Diego Comic-Con, and, you know, they've always kind of felt like a lot of people view it as they're catching up, but when you watch the Snyder Cut, you have BVS that really introduces this world to a seasoned Wonder Woman, a seasoned Batman. Then you also have a Superman that's still searching. He's still on the same arc that he went through in MOS, and then, you know, we don't finally get our quote-unquote traditional Superman until this film's third act. And even then, it's very much teased, but this film sets up and allows it to breathe. Like, I never for once felt like I needed a solo Flash movie because, you know, to Josh's point, you know, a lot of people by this point already know the Flash because they've spent so many seasons with Grant Gustin as that character. Like, yes, this is a different version of that character. It's still a younger version, still more vulnerable, still, you know, whatever version of that character, but we know enough about him to, you know, call it what it is. And I wrote in my notes that, like, if anything, you know, Aquaman was going off to get his own movie. This movie, more than anything, not only felt like it was building towards that climactic, you know, Justice League Groot shot that we got, but also this was a Cyborg origin story right here. Like there's so much of the backstory, and to Cyborg, like what Celeste was saying, like, Cyborg is such an integral part of this film. Like, to just say that he's not important to this film would be a massive understatement, because he's ridiculously powerful. Like he is on par with, like, Superman in the terms of, like, the digital realm. And given how, like, 90% of our world now is digital, we're recording this podcast via digital. Like, he communicates with Diana digitally. Like, he is able to hack into Star Labs digitally. Like, you see how much he's able to do simply by sheer will. Like, he is able to hack into the Unity and the mother boxes at the very end of this movie, and, you know, he just kind of left on the cutting room floor. Like, that's the biggest thing that is so bittersweet about this movie, is that because of, like Celeste said, everything that happened with, you know, Ray Fisher as an actor, and kind of, like, you know, his relationship with some of the higher ups at Warner Brothers in DC, like, for the reshoots, like, he's kind of, like, lost his chance to ever, you know, play this character again. And on top of that, you know, he was supposed to be an integral part of the Flash movie, and now he's kind of cut. And he's one of the best parts of this movie. He is the emotional foundation of this film.
He is. I mean, and I think there's... I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Only thing I just wanted to say is just, I mean, imagine that we were in Ray Fisher's shoes. Like, imagine that someone comes up to you and says, hey, you know, your big break is going to be that you're going to be in the Justice League film, and you're going to have the part of Cyborg. I mean, and Josh already laid claim to it. Cyborg is almost equal to Superman when it comes to the digital realm. I mean, this guy has control of all the nuclear weapon arsenal in the world. There's no encryption. There's no like security system that can keep him away from hacking into anything. And we see before he becomes Cyborg that this guy was already a hacker. And he was using those skills for good use. He was helping his friend, a friend that was going through a hardship, to get good grades so he could pass through school. And we see as Cyborg, he's using his power for good. He sees that there's this woman who's going through problems. She has 2 kids. She's riding the bus. You know, she's getting evicted from her home. She doesn't have any money. And he's able to help her get thousands of dollars and to change her life. And Silas tells him, like, the only thing that's going to be hard is, like you not doing anything with this power. Like, because, I mean, you can do anything with a touch of your finger. The only thing is that what are the choices that you're going to make is going to define who your character is. And as we can see, Cyborg decides to use his power for good. I mean, this guy, if I was him, I would be using, you know, his powers to see, okay, like, who really killed John F. Kennedy? Like, does Bigfoot really exist? You know, like, I want to know all the secrets, because he has a treasure trove of secrets he could get into. But the point is for Cyborg is that he feels like that he's almost like a Frankenstein, like, because he was supposed to die in that accident, but his father brings him back. And in the beginning, he's wondering, like, why did you even bring me back like this? Like, it feels like I'm a monster. Like, I have these abilities, but what does those abilities do? It's not going to bring my mother back. You know, it's not going to bring her back. And I already feel estranged from you because you were never there to see my games. You were busy with work. But over time, we see that he has a journey. And I like that Josh said that this doubles as an origin story. Like, it made me more excited to have a Cyborg standalone film. I think that would be the biggest wish I would want. Is after seeing this, I would want a Cyborg standalone film.
Yeah, I know there's some drama around him right now, and I know, you know, it seemed like they cut him out of the Flash thing. I think if there's a theme with any of the positive reviews going out, and there's tons of positive reviews around this, it's that he was the heart of this film. So yeah, I can't imagine what went on in Ray Fisher's head, because not only did they say, hey, you're going to have your big break in Justice League and you're going to be a super badass, powerful character, but also you're going to be the heart of the film. The film is going to hinge on your story. And then to have that cut, like, I mean, so much of that cut. And then not only did they cut a lot of his stuff, they had to film other things to make sense. You know, like, without him and his father's sacrifice, they didn't know how to find the boxes, you know. But in the Justice League, they had things like Batman and that dude on the roof, and when the parademon exploded, there was the 3 boxes and the blood, and they had to do all this other stuff to rewrite about how the Justice League found Steppenwolf's lair and everything. And they already had that because it was part of the Cyborg thing. So not only did they cut so much Cyborg stuff out, but then they spent $25 million to do reshoots to make sense of this, you know, of the other stuff. And it was just like, you know, I mean, I couldn't imagine the stuff going on in Ray Fisher's head over the last couple of years, because it'd be heartbreaking. It'd be irritating. I mean, I'm getting anger just thinking about it, and I'm not him, you know? So I loved Cyborg in this, and I loved the interactions with his dad, the small ones and the big ones. There was so much heart and so much emotion in that. And yes, it really did make me want to see more of that character, and I hope we do, because yeah, he definitely deserves it.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. and two, his character, like Celeste was talking about with when it comes to Aquaman, is that Victor has very much that hero's journey as well. Because when we first meet him, like, he's still mourning the loss of his mother, and he still blames his father for it. And, you know, we talked about it in WandaVision, where you have like just this unattainable like amount of grief, and what do you do with that thing, especially when you're still like processing the fact that like you should have been dead, and you know now are a, for lack of a better word, like you're Frankenstein. And you know, what do you do with all of this thing? And I think that, you know, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this film was getting to see the healing process between Victor and Silas. Like, you know, because bitterness and, you know, anger and resentment, like all of those hold such a, they just hold you down as an individual. And, you know, when you're processing multiple different things, adding in an alien invasion, it makes it that much harder. And so I really loved the fact that we got to see how vulnerable this character was, but also how relatable he was as well, because coming from someone that has gone through all of those emotions, like, it is a long time to process. And even still, like, you can come back and still experience some of those things nowadays. And with Silas Stone, we also got a more pivotal role with Star Labs, a much needed reboot with Star Labs.
Well, and that one moment when Silas is on the walkie-talkie and he's like, it's, you know, it's someone hacked into us, it's a false alarm, and then the doors open and he sees his son, you know, in the middle of all these superheroes. And this was after, you know, after telling his son that you can't live in this apartment forever. There's so much you can do with your life if you just, you know, accept who you are. You could be the biggest thing, you know, you could be a hero. And then to see his son walk past him with these heroes, it was just a very simple moment, but it was a powerful moment because it was a father seeing the realization of what his son could be, and then moments later choosing to sacrifice himself so that his son and those heroes could make a difference. It was very powerful. And it was more powerful because of these extended scenes and this more, you know, commentary and everything behind them that we didn't get with the original cut.
That scene with his dad and him walking in with all the superheroes into Star Labs is so emotional. The one strange thing about it is I get his dad, like, he's almost like awestruck, like, oh, okay, like, I don't need to know what's going on, I just know this is important. Batman is here, obviously. This is a huge thing that my son is involved in, but never stops to question why they're carrying a casket with a dead body inside. Just has no questions, wants no clarification, just is totally cool that they're just carrying a dead body into Star Labs. Like, that's totally normal.
Yeah, he gives him the head nod. He's like, yeah.
That's it, man. And that's trust between a father and a son, I guess. But, man, I loved his whole backstory and, like, those scenes of him just on the football field and seeing everything that his life, like, his whole life was ahead of him and he had this potential. And then seeing the broken down version of him that his dad was trying to literally rebuild, it reminded me weirdly of the 2014 RoboCop film, when you finally see what remains of him before he's given all of his prosthetic parts and everything. And it's I mean, it's both shocking and horrifying, but that's what this movie does. Is the original cut of Justice League was, or the theatrical release I should say, was a more of like a family friendly, like, oh, come to the movies and watch these superheroes kick ass for a couple hours. This was much more like, we're gonna break you down to the the brink of humanity and really show you what these characters have been through, and then we'll build them up. But you got to see all of the trauma that they've been through in order to get to that point.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about Cyborg. I think Flash was similarly bastardized in the Joss Whedon. I mean, you know, we see the scene with Iris, and the Flash is trying to get a job as a dog walker just so that he could get enough money to get that degree. He's so determined to pay for his college so that he could get a degree and help his dad that he's getting a dog walker job. And, he has that scene with her, and that was a cool scene. But what they cut out from the end with him, man, just so that, they spent money to do reshoots with him pushing a Russian family in a pickup truck and joking with the daughter. They cut out him going back in time to save the entire planet, man. I mean, like, how do you even present that to a board of people that are like, oh yeah, this pickup scene will be much more better and more impactful than reversing time to save the entire planet? It was insane. When I was watching that, I'm like, is this really happening? Like, this is what they cut? This is huge. And it was beautiful. And then, the whole the bodies coming back together, it was really well shot. But there's the impact of that scene of him, just like with Cyborg, him listening to his father and stepping up to the plate. It was huge, and I just couldn't believe that was cut. It's so strange to me.
It's not even just that scene either. It's the first time that he meets Steppenwolf. He is, no longer the character that runs and hides and says, "Oh, you guys, I hate bugs and I've just, pushed the people and run away." Like, he's not that guy anymore. He's not this Peter Parker ripoff character anymore. He is, seasoned in enough and confident enough in his abilities to, say like, hey, like, I know that I can turn back time, and I've established that this rule is something that I'm never going to do. And in the end, he needs to do it not once but twice in this movie. It also shows you how powerful of a character that he is, and also at the same time, like, sets it up for his solo character, because we've been hearing rumors now that it's going to be Flashpoint, which is a comic movie. It's an animated movie, but it's also a limited series that Jeff Johns did in the mid-2000s, where he basically goes back in time and resets the timeline. Like, that is the point of Flashpoint. And this movie demonstrates that Barry is capable of doing that, but he's also a more confident character this time around. Like, even when he gets shot by the parademons, he's ready to, go back into the action. He's like, I'm just waiting to heal. But he still proves that he's, like, still vulnerable and still has a lot to learn.
Yeah, he felt just like he didn't need to be there in the Joss version. Like, he just felt like the side character. He's a superhuman, and yet he felt at times like the weakest person on the roster, weaker than Batman, and that they were just like, oh, just go do something, like go get that family out. We've got the actual battle, and yet in this version he was integral to the plan, and yes, he was still kind of young and finding himself, but he wasn't just so removed from the plan and from the full impact of what the finale was going on. He was a part of it, and then he brought the final thing that saved everybody, or at least that stopped the world from ending. I just thought, yeah, it was so strange how much they minimized him in the Joss reshoots when he was a lot bigger and a lot more vital to the team in Snyder's cut.
Yeah, I felt like with the Josh reshoots, it was like, hey guys, we got this character who can run really fast and he can break the speed of light, and he has all these great fantastical lightning visual effects around him. In this film, we see that Flash, he's trying to work. He's working 3 jobs, almost has to get a 4th just to pay for college tuition for a criminal law degree. And the one thing that me and Josh should talk about during the commentary is why they had cut out the scenes with Barry's father. Like, in this film, we see the reason why he's doing what he's doing. He wants to get his father out of jail because his father is wrongly imprisoned for the death of his mother. We have something that I can feel connected to, even though, yes, I don't have the ability to run like at the speed of light, but I can understand a guy who's having to work like a lot of jobs in order to achieve a goal. I mean, anybody who has been through college knows that, hey, in college, you don't have that much money. So sometimes you got to work a job, or maybe you have to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. And it's all to achieve a goal that's bigger than yourself. And that's what we see Flash doing. And we see that for all his great powers he has, like you said, he's vulnerable. You know, he gets shot and he has to wait for himself to heal. Or like the plans that they have to resurrect Superman, that Batman tells him like, hey, you're going to have to push yourself hard in order to make this so we can resurrect him back. And nobody knows that this is going to work. But it's all about having that belief, having that confidence, and being able to think about saving the world than just only yourself. And we see that Flash, he has the capability to be like, hey, if I need to sacrifice myself, if I need to push myself to the brink of almost certain death, then I'll do that. And that makes a true hero, someone who is willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. And that's what we got with Flash in this film. I always have to say that the 2 heroes that got the most benefit from this new Snyder Cut was Cyborg and the Flash. Yeah. You know, and also everybody else too. I mean, even Wonder Woman, we see that in Wonder Woman's first scene, I can't tell you the difference between the way that robbery scene felt in the Whedon cut and this one, but I can tell you that something just felt different. Like the Wonder Woman theme coming in, you know, her lines, the way that she's able to save all the hostages. And then we had the little scene with the girl at the end. She's like, hey, I want to be like you. And that's what the original Wonder Woman was all about, how Diana was inspiring young girls to want to be like her, to strive to be her, to look like her, to be heroes. That was the big deal about when Wonder Woman first came out. And it was nice to see that moment in the Snyder Cut where even Snyder realizes, like, yeah, Wonder Woman, she's a female hero. We don't get that a lot. And it was nice to see that girls were looking up to her and seeing her as this guiding light.
Well, much like Silas says to Victor, we have only scratched the tip of the tip when it comes to the Snyder Cut. So we are going to put a pause on this episode. Join us again in a couple days where we'll continue this conclusion to this episode. But where can people find more online from you, Mr. Howell?
Like you said earlier, I'm part of the Nerf Herders Assembled podcast. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube. We try to do at least weekly stuff, and we're going to do some more watch parties. We kind of got a taste for that with the Road to Snyder Cut, so that's coming up in the future. If you're interested in sci-fi novels, comics, fantasy books, you can check out my website, Fierce Literature, or fiercelit.com, or find me at one of the Comic-Cons when those things come back.
And where can people find out more information about Feelin' Film?
You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You know, come through, listen to some episodes, and also check out Feelin' Film Black Label. I know a lot of people have been pining us for new episodes, but schedules have just been busy, but we're going to get back on it. So check us out there. And also, we have some written reviews from past years also on the site as well.
All right, and even though he's the resident movie man here, he's the video game nerd when it comes to Twitter. So where can people find you online?
That is too true. You can find me over at Twitter, username DRock64, or at DRock6499. Either one should show up there. And yeah, I am continuing to share and write stuff over at Tech Raptor. I've got some really cool stuff coming up for the Resident Evil 25th anniversary, which is this month. So check it out there. And yeah, doing some cool stuff over there.
All right, well, you guys can follow my film journey over at Letterboxd. I'm at Captain Nostalgia. But other than that, you guys can find us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd as well. We're also on Patreon, and you guys can hear that commentary that Celeste and I did for Justice League 2017, along with helping us get mental health resources into schools, all of which can be found at patreon.com/victims and villains. And if you go to victimsandvillains.net/hope, you guys can also find our mental health resource library as well. We'll be back in a couple days talking about Justice League Snyder Cut Part 2.